Hey everyone, this is Avani from Hatchcraft Heirlooms, and I am here today to talk about how to celebrate Beltane, which is one of my favorite holidays. Thus, as usual, the super fun costume, because I love costumes. It's only kind of a costume, let's be honest. A lot of this is my normal everyday clothes. The skirt, hey, oh my gosh, everybody's here quick. I am a fairy today. I got dressed up because today's fairy week. Today's fairy week, and we're going to be talking about how to celebrate Beltane today. And I used to actually run a fairy festival locally. So some pieces of this, the wings, the crown, are things that I used to wear to that actually, that I basically just need an excuse to wear for today, because I wanted it to be super extra magical, because Beltane to me is so much about fairies and nature spirits, and I figured, if I didn't wear it today, when else was I going to get the opportunity? But thanks for being here. If you're here watching, if you want to throw a hashtag live into the comments, if you're watching on the replay, hashtag replay. This is great. People don't usually tune in so quick. I don't have to, worry too much about that. But the algorithm does help. When you put that hashtag, it kind of helps the algorithm reach out and find other people who might want to watch with us.
But thanks for being here.
Or with you, rather. There we go. I was just opening up an extra tab for myself. I'm glad you're here, especially if you're on Facebook. If you could please throw in a hashtag live into the comments, that'd be great, because Facebook doesn't like to show me. It doesn't show me names. It just gives me a number, and I want to be able to say hello. I like getting to say hi. All right. So in our pre-show, while we wait to see if anybody else is going to show up, I thought that we would talk a little bit about the Tuatha De Danann. Now, I am not 100% sure that I'm pronouncing that correctly, because I've only ever read it and never heard anybody else say it out loud. But the Tuatha De Danann basically means the people of Danu, who is sort of the main great mother goddess within the Celtic Irish pantheon of mythology. So Beltane, just to start really quickly, usually, so the ancient Celts only had two seasons. They had summer and they had winter. And Samhain marked the beginning of the dark half of the year. And Beltane marked the beginning of summer and the light half of the year. And the ancient Celts in general believed that any in-between time or in-between place, such as inside of a doorway, or again, where day met night, or where summer met winter, or winter met summer, were very, very sacred times where they believed that the veil was thin. So at Samhain, we had a focus on the ancestors, and at Beltane, we had a focus on nature spirits and fairies. Now, when we think of a fairy in the modern day, we usually think about this with the pretty butterfly wings, these little teeny tiny pixie things bouncing from flower to flower. But historically speaking, that is not what the fairies were like at all. I'd like to say that I believe that a lot of the kind of modern day fairy imagery we get has to do with things that were developed much, much later. Originally, fairies were really thought of as being more like you and me, generally human-sized, just a sort of a different race of a being that had sort of supernatural powers. And Tuatha De Danann were one of the main, a race like that was considered to be special. So some people believe that the Tuatha De Danann actually represented ancient deities. Again, there's a lot of back and forth, and no one's really sure exactly. The Tuatha De Danann, they were skilled in art and poetry and magic. Hey, Sneaky Cat 78, we're here talking about how to celebrate Beltane, which is why you have me at my fairy best today. And these are actual wings. This isn't a filter. These are my actual fairy wings that I threw on for you today. So the Tuatha De Danann most likely resembled sort of like the elves from like Lord of the Rings, like J.R. Tolkien type, styles, very tall, very thin, very sort of pointed, features. Again, they were more human, and they were sort of equally as aloof as elves were often portrayed as being in the fantasy world. And I wrote here all-known, but I think I meant all-knowing. Often considered to be sort of all-knowing, and I kind of liken it to, and this is just me, I don't know if anybody else here is a huge Harry Potter fan. If you are, chime in the comments below so I know where my people are at. But these centaurs in Harry Potter world, or in the universe, I should say, were very sort of aloof and all-knowing in that, hey, Michelle, we're here talking about how to celebrate Beltane today. That's why you have me in my fairy outfit today. So the centaurs, I was just talking, likening the Tuatha De Danann, which is what we're kind of talking about in our pre-show today, to the centaurs from Harry Potter, which sounds like a stretch, but bear with me. in that they were sort of aloof and they had a sort of sense of knowing things that seemed supernatural. Thank you. Michelle says she loves my outfit. And, you know, the centaurs from Harry Potter, they tended to know things, or the explanation was that they were particularly excellent at astrology and noticing what was happening in the stars, where the Tuatha De Danann were just sort of, you know, omniscient and generally knew a lot. Just closing a window here real quick. So it was generally, so in the mythology and the mythos of the Tuatha De Danann, that particular not species, but race of beings actually were believed to have ruled Ireland at one point. But they were defeated and descended into a new land referred to as Tir na Nog. If you're a fan of Lorena McKenna, I think she actually has a song about Tir na Nog. It's an excellent song. Highly recommend. And their homes were often called Sidhe, which is spelled S-I-D-H-E if you've never seen it before. Referred to as Sidhe or the other world. So a lot of people will use the Sidhe to refer to fairies as well sometimes. And they were often known to interact and at times procreate with humans in myth and folklore, which is similar kind of in a way to the Greeks, who also believe the same thing, by the way. So you got the idea of like demigods like Hercules, for example. I think. I'm not up on my Greek mythology, so if I'm wrong on that, don't strike me down. But, you know, sometimes the Sidhe or the fairies, they were helpful, and sometimes they were not so helpful. You know, and again, we're doing a weird likening of, the Tuatha De Danann to Harry Potter. But again, if you're a Harry Potter fan, let me know in the comments so I know I'm not sounding completely bonkers here. But in the Harry Potter universe, the goblins were often described as having their very own set of morality that was different from humankind, especially as it related to, in the story, ownership of particular items. I'm just realizing I didn't wave at these people here. So, and so fairies kind of sort of similarly, but not at the same time, kind of have a different idea of what morality is and what's right and what's wrong and what's helpful, what's not helpful, what merits helping and what doesn't merit helping. But over time, that said, in the continued sort of Christianization of Ireland as a whole, the big Harry Potter fan, Elle says she gets it, and Michelle too, great, so I'm glad that my references are making sense here. And actually, it makes sense that there'd be a lot of crossover between the real folklore and Harry Potter, because, even though there's a lot of controversy around J.K. Rowling, she was very well researched, and a lot of what she wrote about was based in some sort of history or original, authentic folklore. So I think that that's not a mistake or a coincidence. So anyway, over time, as more and more of Ireland became Christian, the fairies sort of became downgraded to the Fae, or became fairy people, and thought about more the way we do now, as sort of like these little sprites that run around and do nothing consequential. But the original fairies, the original Tuatha De Danann, were very powerful, almost primordial sort of beings who were very powerful. And that's kind of where fairies come from. So that's kind of a cool story. But that said, now that we got through that, let's talk about what everybody I think is here for, and that is how to celebrate Beltane. Which, by the way, really quickly, before I jump into that, if you didn't already know, I have a shop update happening at 6 o'clock. So that's in a little less than 2 hours. That is a Beltane collection shop update that's just full of beautiful vintage pieces that you could use in your Beltane decor, on your altars, or just for fun because they're cute and pretty to look at. The general themes are like fairies and mushrooms and butterflies. So if you love any of those things, you should definitely be there, because there's a lot of fun things that are going to be going on. So anyway, let's talk about Beltane, the actual holiday, not just the things for the holiday. So Beltane as a word actually means bright fire. And that actually was referring to what's called a need fire or a wild fire. And a need fire was actually a practice of, and I see my Facebook is, oh no, it came back, it was paused for half a second. The shepherd people used to light fires to ward off disease from their herds and their flocks. And sometimes it would be, they would do it regularly, but sometimes they would do extra ones if things were starting to go extra sideways to try to get rid of stuff. And it's hard for me to say, not being a historian, exactly how much of that was magic ritual practice, as like, oh, if we light the fires, it's just generally purifying, and how much of that was literally burning of things to kill off microorganisms, because we all know that that is also a thing that really happens. So another thing they would do is that they would drive the cattle actually through a bonfire. And ritually, usually it was two bonfires and the cattle walked in between. Sometimes they talk about cattle and things walking over. I imagine that didn't happen so often as going near the fire on a more symbolic level. But it says here that I wrote as a note here that they considered that the efficacy of these fires was very much dependent on the fact that every other fire, except for those ritual fires, were extinguished. It was the only fire that was going. That was a very, very important factor to these fires that they would build for Beltane, especially in particular. So our modern day Beltane that we celebrate as pagans and witches and Wiccans is an amalgamation of the Anglo-Saxon May Day, which you may have heard of. That's actually still a modern celebrated holiday, although obviously it's been sort of sterilized. That's the word I was looking for. Sterilized a little bit compared to, the way it probably used to be celebrated, much in the way Christmas has. And also there was also a Roman holiday that it's sort of kind of mixed in called Floralia. Obviously you can put two and two together, that flora means flowers, so flowers are a big part of the holiday. Which is why I have flowers on my skirt. I've got flowers on my pants that you can't really see. Flowers on my necklace. Flowers everywhere. And of course also Celtic traditions, which was actually called Beltane, so that's where we actually got the word Beltane from. And then finally also Walpurgis or Walpurgis Nacht, which is Norse Germanic. And we'll talk more about the particulars of those here, so hang in there, because if you know anything about Walpurgis, you might be like, well, wait, that's not exactly pagan. We'll get there, I promise. So May Day, some of the common things that were done traditionally for May Day was the crowning of a May Queen. They are where we get the tradition of the maypole from. And it was also, May Day as a holiday was very strongly tied to tree cults, so there's a lot of cultures that found trees to be extremely sacred, ritually and magically. So part of what they would do in those holidays were related to trees, if not distantly. Not everybody might even realize the connection. But it would involve things like collecting flowering branches, creating flower crowns, or decorating doorways, like the top of a doorbell. Hey, Aethereth? Well, anyway, I'm glad you're here. We're talking about how to celebrate Beltane today. And again, just a quick reminder, if you're here joining and you weren't here earlier when I said as much, please feel free, or actually if you could for me as a favor, put hashtag live into a comment, hashtag replay if you're watching on the replay, especially if you're on Facebook, because I have both Instagram and Facebook happening at the same time, especially on Facebook because Facebook doesn't show me names, whereas Instagram does, and I would love to say hello. And of course, so they would put the flowering branches sometimes on the cross top of doorways, especially like a front doorway. Or sometimes they would make May crowns or garlands or wreaths. So a lot of the flower stuff, is in part from the May Day side. But, the other thing that was a part of May Day, I almost missed this one, is the collecting of May dew, which is really a big part of like glamour and beauty magic. It was believed that if you collected May dew, like the dew from May Day morning, that you could use it in spells and rituals for beauty, to keep you looking youthful. So that's a fun thing. So Floralia, though, now we look at the Roman side, what kind of came from that we're familiar with today. It honored the goddess Flora. And it was also, interestingly, the month of May itself in modern English is named after the Roman goddess Maya. And she was the Roman goddess of growth. She was an earth god. She was also the mother of Hermes, which is really interesting. If I'm not mistaken, I think she was actually a Titan. So, going even further back than the Olympian deities. And on May 1st, it was common that they would, as a society, sacrifice a cow to her. It was a big thing. They were really big into animal sacrifice then. And frequently they would have theatrical performances and competitive gaming. And they would also have dance performances, many of which were performed by prostitutes and or female slaves, according to the sources that I found. Which may or may not, I didn't see this specifically, but I have a sneaky suspicion it was probably a fertility ritual of some sort of variety. And the month of May in Rome was a nocturnal dramatic festival held every 3 years. So it was around the same time as Floralia, but it was only every 3 years. Held every 3 years and known as orgies. I'm not making that up. It was literally called orgies. And it was the mysteries of Dionysus and Aphrodite. So you can kind of, put two and two together there. This is from the Roman side is where we get a lot of the fertility, I believe, side of it. Hey, two offerings. We're here talking about how to celebrate Beltane. You have me in my very best today. Oh, thank you. Part of it's the filter, but thanks. I picked a filter that made me look kind of sparkly, so because I didn't actually get a chance to do anything with my makeup before this, other than I threw on this morning because I had to go somewhere sort of kind of fancy this morning. But anyway, I digress. So let's talk about Beltane, the actual Celtic holiday that is the namesake of our modern holiday. So Beltane, like I said, it was the celebration of the beginning of summer. Super exciting. Which I know here for me, I'm in New England, May 1st seems awfully early to be talking about summertime, but it's around the corner. Don't fool yourself. So the big thing that they did is they would have giant bonfires. Generally, they were singing and dancing around them. And these were oftentimes, especially need fires, which means that I mentioned earlier, but I'll say again because I don't know who might have missed it, often had to do with being purification rituals, especially for the cattle and preventing the cattle from getting sick during the year so that they could continue to be prosperous and fertile and all the good things. So a very common tradition from the Celtic side of things was a May bush. I'm not making that one up either. So they would take a bush and they would decorate it with ribbons and streamers and bits of fabric, and then sometimes also leftover eggshells from Ostara, which was also Celtic. And although I didn't specifically see this anywhere, I strongly suspect that those items were frequently used as petitions, where you would take, a string or a ribbon and tie it on the bush with a wish. So a type of wish magic. And that's a common thing that some people do even still today, for this holiday, is to do what's called well dressing or tree dressing, for wishes for the year ahead. So finally, let's talk about Walpurgis Nacht. I hope I'm not butchering that. I only know how to pronounce it as well as I do because one of my favorite faun songs is called, actually my absolute favorite faun song, F-A-U-N, is Walpurgis Nacht. It's excellent, and has a beautiful video. If you've never checked it out, check it out because you'll love it probably. But Walpurgis Nacht actually started as Walpurgis without the Nacht, so Nacht actually means night. And it was actually is a holiday that's blended with a Germanic pagan spring festival that somehow, it's very convoluted, but basically the original Walpurgis was a celebration of the canonization of the Saint Walpurgis, so it's actually kind of Christian. But there is some suggestions that before that it was a pagan sort of fertility spring festival that presumably the Christian church, like so many other things that it did, kind of co-opted and said, oh, you're doing this on this day? Oh, well, we have the same holiday this day too. You're really just celebrating with us. And then, that's history. So kind of cool story. So, and I have this quote that I put in here so I'd remember to read it to you guys. It says here that given that the intercession of Saint Walpurga, I'm sorry, not Walpurgis, it's Walpurga. Saint Walpurga was believed to be efficacious against evil magic. Medieval and Renaissance traditions held that during Walpurgis night, so the night after, witches celebrated a Sabbath and evil powers were at their strongest. And I think the belief was that Saint Walpurga had driven away witches and magic, so that the night of, or maybe it celebrated their death. It was really unclear. But the point is that that thing about the night of Walpurgis having to do with witches has sort of taken hold in the modern culture. And in Bavaria, the feast is actually sometimes called Witches' Night. And the revelers will actually dress up as witches and demons, and set off fireworks and play loud music. And the whole idea, of course, is to drive away witches or drive away demons, which is, of course, ironic because they're kind of doing magic. And of course, spirits, driving away winter spirits to kind of bring in summertime, of course. And interestingly, the Satanic Temple, again, modern, but still interesting, celebrates Hexanacht, which is around the same time of year, as a solemn holiday to honor those who are victimized for a superstition, so that's a modern thing too. But other things that were commonly done at Walpurgisnacht and Walpurgis in general was mischief making, much like at Samhain, very similar, and bonfires. So again, we have fires. Fire is a big deal. I always kind of talk about how a lot of our holidays, people tend to be like, oh, it's a fire festival. But Beltane legitimately is, it's like one of the fire festivals. So it's a big one. So fires are big. And big fires. Fire. So that said, now that we've talked a little bit about the history of the holiday, let's talk about some ideas for how you could celebrate in the modern day, kind of using all of that as inspiration. So, and again, if you're here watching, because I see some new numbers, but no comments, if you could throw a hashtag live into a comment, that'd be great, so I can say hello. Hashtag live if you're watching, hashtag replay if you're watching on the replay. Helps the algorithm reach out and find other people, and of course it lets me see that you're here paying attention and that you're enjoying yourself, whether you're on Instagram or Facebook. But here, getting around to our ideas for celebrating Beltane. Obviously, you could do something with ritual theater. So theater and performance has been a big part historically of Beltane, May Day, Floralia, etc. celebrations. A really popular thing that people will do is that they will crown a May King and a May Queen. And is often used. And of course, if you don't have the option of crowning a king, you don't have to. You could just crown a May Queen, just a May King. Obviously, I'm sure there's a non-binary term that I'm missing there, but you get the idea. Crowning a May somebody who's royalty. But it's often looked at as a way to honor the goddess or the titan Maya and Vulcan, they were consorts in the mythology. And if you do happen to do both, you can actually do it as a marriage ceremony, because the holiday is often looked at in the Wiccan mythology, so we're getting really modern here, as the day that the god and the goddess get married. And actually, as interesting to that, I don't have this written down, but I happen to know this, that oftentimes it's actually considered to be taboo to get married on May 1st, many believing because that is the day that like the earth and the sun or whatever get married. So to get married on that day would be taking away from their day. So don't do that. That's the thought process anyway. And of course, if you don't have real people that are willing to be crowned as May royalty, you could always do 2 trees or 2 plants or 2 sticks if you really want to get down to it. And you can tie one with a red ribbon and one with a white ribbon, which are common colors used at Beltane to represent one male and female. Or dolls. It could be anything. Or not. Again, this is just one idea. Another idea is a maypole ritual. Now, of course, maypole rituals are a little bit difficult to do unless you're in a big group. Most maypole rituals I've seen are usually large public rituals, which aren't really a thing just yet. Hopefully next year. But the maypole in general represents the union of the male and the female. You have the pole and you have the ribbons that wrap around it. You can use your imagination. I want this to be kind of child-friendly, but you get the idea. Often represents the union of male and female, but there's other people that also say that it can represent the union of man and nature, which I like that one too. And of course, if you're in a couple with somebody else who is magically inclined, you could also couple together. Is a really popular Beltane activity. All the better if you can do it outdoors. That's a great fertility ritual. Again, not necessarily in the literal sense, but can also be in the sense of, manifesting things in your life. And of course, I mentioned earlier tree dressing or bush dressing, or some people will even dress stone walls or wells. Wells are usually more, I believe, lunasa, but they could still apply too. And of course, having a bonfire, like I said, all the fires. Singing and dancing around the fire, definitely encouraged. It can be really ritualized, and where you have a ritual with the casting of the circle and the calling of the goddess, etc., etc. Or it could just be as simple as inviting some friends over and having a drum circle. It doesn't have to get crazy. It's really all about, again, your intention. But just be careful. The great thing about bonfires is that there's actually a really great potential for social distancing, which is really convenient in the modern kind of current situation we all find ourselves in. So that's also an option. And then, of course, feasting and picnicking. It's the perfect time. Where I am at least, I find that usually May is right when the weather starts to get really good for going outside and it's nice and warm. It's the perfect time to go outside and feast or picnic. You know, pretty much every holiday, like every holiday in the entire world, pretty much has like a prescribed food that is, or foods that are associated with it for feasting and having family over and friends and just all of the food. And Beltane, of course, is no different. So just having people over and having a good meal together is also a completely valid way to go. Now, if you are trying to set up an altar for your Beltane celebration, the colors that are usually associated with the holiday are red, white, which I talked about those earlier, blue, green, actually kind of all the colors. To me, my Beltane gets very colorful, like hot pink and all the flower colors, yellows and purples, all the colors. It's a very colorful holiday because this is really the time that the earth is supposed to be exploding with life and flowers and plants and all sorts of beautiful things. Some deities that are associated with the holiday, if you kind of are one of those people that kind of tends to use different deities based on the occasion. Maya, like we said, she's the goddess that the month of May is named after. Flora, which is the namesake of the Roman festival of Floralia, which is one of the historical origins of Beltane, our modern Beltane anyway. Vulcan, Hermes, the Green Man, Mother Earth, Dionysus or Bacchus, Artemis / Diana. Those are both Greek / Roman versions of the same deity, debatably. Frey or Freya, which is Norse, and of course Pan and Gaia. Just for a few, you know, again, because this is very much about the union of the male and female, you kind of get sort of almost archetypal, at least to me, archetypal sort of deities. You got Gaia, who's like Earth Mother, and Pan, or Zeus, even as the Sky Father. Even you could do Zeus and Gaia, even because in the mythology, in the archetypes, you have the Earth Mother and the Sky Father is usually the kind of pairing. But don't quote me on that Zeus and Gaia thing. That might be weird. My kind of take on deity in ritual is, you know, Google the two deities that you're thinking about using. This is my personal preference, I like to stay within the same pantheon in the rituals that I write. I don't know, that feels important to me because I feel like they have sort of established relationship together, so hopefully they'll work well together in the circle with me. And of course, also, I think it's good to research what mythology has to say, any stories that there are of them together, to see how they've gotten along, because obviously, like I said, I want them to get along so we can get along. And again, that's just my personal preference. You do you. Your mileage may vary. Some trees or flowers that are really strongly associated with Beltane include foxglove, clover, cowslip, daisy, hawthorn, wood sorrel, which I love, ash, oak, and walnut. And then some miscellaneous things that are really great. Ribbons! All of the ribbons. Super, like I said, super colorful, all the different colors. Fairies, toadstools, mushrooms, gnomes, butterflies, bees. Now, if you were paying attention at the beginning and when I was talking about my shop update that's happening in a little while, most of those things on my miscellaneous are in this drop. So do feel free to check it out. That said, that's all I have about how to celebrate Beltane today. The next part of this live is usually dedicated to a curated live sale. So these are, but before I do that, I'm actually going to do a little sign off because I'm going to be uploading this video to YouTube. But I'm going to cut out the part that's after this because that gets a little tedious for them. So if you're here watching on YouTube, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a blessed Beltane and that I catch you really soon for one of my shop updates. So take care and blessed be. Mwah.